So there are on the acquired heart diseases in children, there are two important diseases which will present both as fever uh, in children, which can have long-term sequela in terms of possible adult onset or uh, and Kawasaki disease. So both will present as non-cardiac, pareha silang fever, no? But the rheumatic fever is the only one which has long-term sequela, and that is valvular defect, chronic valvular disease. And then sa Kawasaki naman, it also presents with long fever more than 5 days in younger children, and it presents with coronary artery aneurysm. There is continuous inflammation, which can occur in both no diagnosis and management. First is rheumatic fever. So, okay na tayo ulit. Unstable na. Ah. So, it's the most common, no? RF. There has been a lot of studies going on with RFRHD, particularly because we have to control or stop RFRHD to prevent rheumatic heart disease in adulthood. So we like to know the impact. What is the impact of proper diagnosis and management? And of course, the reason why we discuss in pediatrics is get RFRHD. Can you please mute all? So we know that rheumatic fever is progression, develops by progression, wherein you have a strep infection from sore throat can lead to rheumatic fever. And if there is no prevention, it can lead to rheumatic heart disease. Not all, of course, sore throat will lead to RF. You have what you call susceptible host. Now, when the strep infection occurs, when you have sore throat, so you have a strep age. No, the strep age is actually 5 to 15 years of age. But there has been studies that since parang dikit-dikit, di ba? You have the families, you have uh, a lot of overcrowding, no? So overcrowding will lead to streptococcus or sore throat in the younger age pag overcrowded sila or in the older age more than 15 because of overcrowding and poor living conditions. So if you do not fully treat strep infection, it will lead to recurrent strep infection. It's the recurrent strep infection that will destroy the heart and lead to rheumatic fever. Now, if you do not detect rheumatic fever and you do not give prophylaxis, then over time, within 3 months, 3 to 6 months, it will lead to rheumatic heart disease. So rheumatic heart disease is actually immunologic in nature. So you do not detect the bacteria when they have rheumatic fever or rheumatic heart disease. It is the seventh leading cause of mortality years ago and the 24th leading cause of heart failure in adulthood. So it becomes a major public health problem in most developing countries, and it is the most common acquired heart disease in children and young adults in the country. So this is in the Philippines, no, it is the leading cause. It is coronary artery disease is 19.83%, and world rank is 32. Now, in rheumatic heart disease, it is number 39 in the Philippines as the leading cause of heart disease. No, leading cause of mortality or death. It is number 39. So, and in the mortality is 0.46% of total death. So the RHD death rate is 2.87 per 100,000, and it's the number 71 in the world. So we have studied rheumatic fever or rheumatic heart disease in the Philippines. We have a registry, registering all the patients diagnosed with rheumatic fever, rheumatic heart disease in so years back, it is 35.8% incidence of RFR of rheumatic fever in children. They've noted a decrease, by 35.8%. However, they noted again, maybe because there was better reporting and there was better understanding. So you have a continuous increase because of better recognition and better understanding, therefore better reporting. However, after 2021, 66.2% decrease. So we like to think that the several efforts done by the government and education among healthcare workers contributed to the decrease in the incidence of RFRHD in the country. And that is why we like to make this a continuing education for primary healthcare workers like you, because you are the first who will see the patients in the next year or when you start to practice. Okay, so in a registry of the hospitals, only 24.6% are actually children, whereas 75.3% are adults. This is
Nagising ako.
the continuum of RFRHD. It is really the lack of recognition in children that leads to progression, and that when they reach adulthood, they are really, the valve is already destroyed. Therefore, there are now overt RHD. Kasi wala pa so, it's really a continuum. So, sasabihin mo, paano ka ba nagkaka-rheumatic? If I do not give treatment, when will rheumatic heart disease develop? So, the peak age at which it occurs is at 20 to 30 years of age. And that is the reason why it is very slow disease. Pag hindi mo ginamot, then they become symptomatic in adulthood. So, what is rheumatic heart disease? So this one, the peak age is 25 to 30 years of age. You have an exposure to sore throat. They have a strep A infection. After 2 to 3 weeks, they can have rheumatic fever, and it becomes asymptomatic, So if there's no prevention after 25 to 30 years of age, then they may be diagnosed as rheumatic heart disease. So this is really a progressive heart disease. They studied, when does RHD become rheumatic fever become RHD, and RHD leading to heart failure. So they found out that at 1 year, their 35% will lead to RHD. After 5 years, 51%. After 10, 61%. So meron ka pang 40% may be undiagnosed and will lead to later on, a later age. So when does an RHD develop to heart failure? So 14% in less than 1 year, 21% in 1 year, and 27% will lead to heart failure in the next 5 years. So there is the natural history of rheumatic fever. There is a latency period of rheumatic heart disease. So in a 5-year follow-up, there did a prospective studies that they found out that malakas talaga you have latent. When you say latent, it occurs without symptoms. Before we were saying fever, joint pain, and fever, in the absence of symptoms, is not rheumatic fever. But because they found out na more than 20% or more than 70% are in adulthood, it means they were discovered late because they were asymptomatic. So the natural history of latent RHD is unclear, but it is now an important clinical and economic implication whether the child should receive prophylaxis or not. So, kailangan ba natin malaman sino ang may rheumatic fever na younger age group so that you can give prevention and decrease the number of adults who have rheumatic heart disease. So, In a follow-up of RHD children amongst RHD school children, the mean age was 13.1 minus 4, and usually 4 or 5 months. This will become borderline at a younger age. When they are borderline, 47% may revert to normal, 20% may improve and become definite or borderline or remain borderline. 31% remain definitely progressive, and only 20% progress to symptomatic. So for us, we would like to detect who will revert to normal, who will become persistent, and who will progress. And that is the idea of giving prevention. So the burden of the disease in rheumatic fever, rheumatic heart disease is really in those who are not symptomatic. So we know the Jones criteria for detecting RFRHD. You have the asynchronous lecture, diba? So late before the prevalence of RFRHD is in developed countries is 0.5. Can everybody please mute your media department? Ayan, okay. So in developing countries, now the incidence is 78 per 100,000 and increases by 25 to 34 years of age. However, because of the asymptomatic portion, they found out that the true incidence may be 10 times greater than those who are detected clinically, because 90% of RHD are really subclinical, and that is the reason why there's an increasing number of RFRHD, because they might have been undetected at an early age. So now, how do you control RFRHD? You have 3 levels of control, diba? In primary prevention, therefore, you have to treat all sore throat to prevent the development of RHD to rheumatic fever. And how do you treat sore throat? Now, in your asynchronous lecture, you will say that you should give the antibiotic for 10 days. So, dapat complete treatment. Once there's incomplete treatment, then there's a possibility for it to develop to rheumatic. In those who are susceptible and develop rheumatic fever after 2 to 3 weeks, you have what you call secondary prevention, and the secondary prevention is giving the IM injection every 21 days to prevent progression. Why do we give IM injection? Because they found out that in patients who are diagnosed with RF, there is a 15% more chance, 15 times more chance for them to have sore throat than those who do not have history. Therefore, they should be given the prevention or 50% the dose by giving IM injection in the susceptible age. So the susceptible age for rheumatic fever is 5 to 15 years of age. But because in the Philippines, we have an increased number of RHD, then they extended the prevention, they extended the injection up to 21 years of age to assure na ma-eradicate ang rheumatic fever. And what is tertiary prevention? Tertiary prevention is prevention from dying. So in those who have severe, they have to undergo surgery and have valve replacement as part of the management of RFRHD. So primary prevention is completely treat sore throat. Secondary prevention is give the secondary prophylaxis, and tertiary prevention is prevention for dying. That's why you send them for surgery. So we now have a national recommendation for the Philippines. We now give IM penicillin for free. But when we started giving the secondary and prophylaxis for free, then there was a 100% compliance with the injection. So compliance to injection is very important. So if you say IM injection every 21 days, that's a total of 17 injections per year. So in the 17 injections per year, usually they found out that if the injection is less than 50%, then that is poor control. There will be good control if the injection is giving 80% for that is. So this 80% of 17, maybe 15 times, you can have an absent injection for 2 months. However, there is no exchange 200%. And that is the reason why the government has now as a program to give the prophylaxis for free. No, we are the first country in Asia who can give the prophylaxis for free in the attempt to eradicate rheumatic fever, rheumatic heart disease in the next 10 years. So what is important to stop RFRHD? You need to have the national implementation of the free, increase awareness among the healthcare workers and not only to doctors. You have to monitor those who are diagnosed so that you will see who will progress, who will be borderline, and who will progress to RHD. You have to educate even the primary healthcare workers and to prevent the development in the young. Do we screen children with RHD kasi marami sa kanila asymptomatic. No? Asymptomatic. So now there's a recommendation to screen children with in the school age, no, by doing to the echo, detect who has mild RHD or there is a rheumatic fever at younger age so that you can give them the free injection. So how do you control the RFRHD? Here, by giving the injections for free, which we are already doing. Then is those who are in heart failure or those with a progressive disease, no, you have to send them for surgery. And now, this year, the Philippine Health Insurance has already approved free RHD or free valve surgery among those who need surgery in adults. So in the 3 levels of control, parang the government has already given under the Philippine Health Insurance all the possibilities now so that eventually we can stop the progression of RFRHD in the country in the next 20 years. What we lack now is to know sino ba, ilan ba ang affected. So we need a national registry. You have to make rheumatic fever reportable disease so that we know what is really the magnitude, how many are really affected, so we know who needs injection and needs prophylaxis only and who needs surgery. So there are now criteria in detecting when you do the echo, which you have learned in IM, who will detect who will need surgery. So education is very important, no? That's why we are doing this, and I've revised my lecture to inform you. Next is primary care is very important. Sore throat is very common, no? One of the most common complaint of children. However, how do we know that the sore throat is bacterial or not? Most common is viral, but we have to treat all bacterial sore throat completely for 7 to 10 days, no? To assure that it will not lead to rheumatic fever. So now we are promoting a sore throat clinical pathway o kaya in medical students know how to treat sore throat to prevent so that they are able to detect streptococcal sore throat to prevent rheumatic fever. So there is now, since 2021, we have noted in the reporting that there is 66% decrease. However, following up, we have not yet reached those who are totally diagnosed because we are now collecting how many patients really have rheumatic fever in the country. So intensification in education and screening is very important. So this is a very important slide. As I was telling you earlier, if you have in the natural history, there are 3 areas of control. You have a Breta, hemolytic strep. There is a susceptible host. It leads to strep infection. After 10 to 14 days, it can lead to rheumatic fever. After 2 to 3 months, if you do not give secondary prevention, there are 2 things. Those without carditis and with carditis. When you say those without carditis, these are those who present with fever and joint pains without heart disease. And those with fever, joint pains, and heart failure. Those with carditis will lead to chronic rheumatic cardiomyopathy. and those without may not lead to chronic cardiomyopathy. So that is the reason why before we were recommending only 5 years for those without carditis and up to age 21 for those with carditis. So primary prevention is prevention for progression of sore throat to RF. So you have to treat the sore throat for complete treatment 10 days, and the prevention for progression and relapse is by giving the injection, because they found out that the relapse or sore throat will continually damage the valve. No? So if you do not complete, and those who have RF will have 15 times more chance of developing recurrent sore throat than those without. So we have to identify what is the factor. It is the beta hemolytic strep. Why is it very virulent? Because it has several layers. It has the cytoplasm, the cell membrane, no? Then it has 3 layers. It has a capsule, plus you have this one, the fimbriae lipoteichoic acid plus M protein, plus you have a very thick cell wall. So each of the component will lead to the different manifestations of RF. The beta hemolytic strep will have cross-reaction at different areas to produce the different manifestations. So cross-reaction with the valvular protein will lead to carditis, the strep carbohydrate. The strep protoplasm tissue and neuronal tissue will lead to chorea, and the capsular hyaluronate and articular cartilage reaction will lead to arthritis. Among these manifestations, carditis will be the most important because it is only the one which will lead to chronicity or chronic manifestations. Okay, so the essential elements in RF 2.3 to 3% will have group A pharyngitis. 50% of those with previous RF will develop RF recurrences following pharyngitis, and therefore will lead to chronic valvulopathy. So before they found out that it's just pharyngitis, but now it is believed that strep secondary to skin infection can also lead to rheumatic fever. Therefore, skin infections will lead to uh, strep G and glomerulonephritis. But now, they have found out that even skin infection can lead to rheumatic fever. So there's actually a cross reaction. So some patients with kidney infection can also have rheumatic fever. So it previously sabi nila hindi. But now, most patients with acute glomerulonephritis can have varying degrees also of rheumatic fever. However, kung mas severe ang kidney, the involvement of the heart is almost second level. So if the heart is more severe, usually, mas common ang GN with RF than RF with GN. So carditis is the most important manifestation. It occurs in 40 to 50%. So how different is carditis from the carditis due to strep compared with others? Only rheumatic fever can have pancarditis. When you say pancarditis, all the 3 layers of the heart are involved. You have the endocarditis, the endocardium or the inner lining of the heart. So it presents as valvular insufficiency onto the echo. Myocarditis or the muscle of the heart. So most patients will have tachycardia, and pericarditis, then they have pericardial effusion. So the inflammation occurs in all 3 layers. In the acute phase, you can only have valvulitis. Once you have chronic phase or recurrence, they can have fibrosis, calcification, and stenosis of the heart valves, and leading to fish mouth valve. So there are 2 things. Either there is stenosis or insufficiency, so that rheumatic fever can have mitral stenosis or mitral effusion. But how about arthritis? Arthritis is more common in children. No? The characteristic in arthritis is migratory polyarthritis, which means that it involves the weight-bearing joints, the larger joints, including the knees, elbows, and the wrist. What is peculiar also is it is asymmetrical. When you say asymmetrical, only one joint is involved versus yung isa three. The knee, isa lang ang involved, the other one has no involved. Why does that happen? Because it is self-limiting. Self-limiting, the one joint improves before the next joint is involved. That's why there's a false feeling that it is migrating. The characteristic feature also is there is no long-term deformity compared with rheumatoid arthritis. In rheumatoid arthritis, it involves the small joints. In rheumatic fever arthritis, it involves the large joints. In rheumatoid arthritis involvement, it is symmetrical, which means both hands or both joints are affected. In RFRHD, it is asymmetrical, does not involve. And most important also is the response to treatment. One dose of paracetamol, aspirin can change the manifestation versus rheumatoid arthritis. Weeks of treatment or days of treatment may not improve the inflammation of the child. So that is the most important characteristic. You will be able to detect rheumatic fever by history. Next is Sydenham's chorea. Diba? These are purposeless, involuntary movements often associated with muscle weakness and emotional lability. So in the first phases, the patient may be drop some things, dropping or things only, or a very poor change in the penmanship, They often disappear with sleep, so the dance movement disappears with sleep, and neuroexamination will confirm other neurological disorders. The neuroexam is usually normal. It is common in prepubertal girls, and there's a latency period of 1 to 8 months, and it resolves in 3 to 6 months, and there is no neurological sequela. Because of the long latency period, sabihin ng latency period, I had a strep infection today, or I was involved in strep infection, and the manifestation of chorea will occur after 6 to 8 months. So when I do my test, ASO, ESR scan, they are already negative. So it is the only major manifestation that can exist alone because of the long latency period. So another feature is erythema marginatum, occurs in less than 6% of patients. It has a unique evanescent rash, ganyan, with pale symptoms. So this is erythema marginatum. Where does it occur? Mainly on the trunk and proximal extremities, and heat can induce its appearance and blanches with pressure. Well, what are the important differential diagnoses for these patients? So the differential diagnosis may be the viral exanthems, but yes. But viral exanthems are usually differential diagnosis for Kawasaki rather than erythema. Okay. So subcutaneous nodules, what is the difference? These are painless nodules occurring in the doors, the extremity. So it can occur in the joints, elbows, knees, and wrists, and even in the scalp. So they are painless. Okay. So these are the major manifestations of MAD. So in the joints criteria, what is important? One major plus two minor, or two minor plus one major. So carditis is the most common, arthritis, chorea, and then least common is erythema marginale. So if any one of these occur, then you have to look at the heart to the ECMO to look for carditis, because the presence of carditis will lead to chronicity. Minor criteria would be fever, arthralgia, evidence in lab test of prolonged PR interval in ECG, or increased acute phase reaction. So there's a generalized inflammation. So we have a clinical pathway for detecting rheumatic fever in a patient who are suspected with RF. So look for what's important is you ask for recurrent strep infection. Was there joint pain with or without fever in the last 2 weeks? Is there a new murmur? Is there heart failure? or is there motor instability? Then exclusion criteria will those with a positive infection or proven diagnosis such as SLE or rheumatoid arthritis. So what you do is you check for the major manifestation. Is there joint pain? And there is joint pain, at least two of the following is true. Is it migratory in nature? Does it involve large joints? Is it there are polyarthritis? Is there tenderness? So you have to elicit the elements of inflammation, which are tenderness, pain on tenderness is pain on touching, diba? Then pain on locomotion. So the child is usually limping. If there is no associated limping or pain on movement, then it becomes a minor criteria, arthralgia lang siya. And there's instantaneous relief when there is no joint deformity. So these are the characteristics of rheumatic fever as a major manifestation. In carditis, it can present as chest pain, tachypnea, tachycardia. Sometimes sleeping heart rate more than 100 is a sensitive feature of carditis in children. Pallor at rest, then you check if the patient, the functional class, does the patient have easy fatigability? The presence of easy fatigability will usually indicate the presence of a possible heart murmur or valvular involvement or a subclinical carditis when you have a positive finding on 2DM. Next, you check for chorea. You have initial clumsiness, emotional lability, St. Vitus dance, which usually disappears during sleep. You check for irregularity in handwriting, which did not occur before, or you can ask the patient to stretch both hands, and if one hand falls more than the other, then it is positive for possible chorea. Then you check for subcutaneous nodules or erythema marginatum. This one, check for erythema marginatum. Check for subcutaneous nodules in the dorsal portion. Check for minor manifestations, fever, monoarthralgia, ESR, and request for ASO, ESR serum. Then you have diagnosis of acute RF when you have two major plus one minor, or any one major plus two minor criteria. Otherwise, if any of this is absent, then you have a suspected rheumatic fever or probable RF. You do not dismiss the patient, but you have to observe the patient. Let the patient follow up with you every 3 months for 1 year. And the patient should have a repeat echo after 1 year. Since we say that the initial symptoms may have been relieved by intake of paracetamol or anything, therefore, pwede kang magkamali sa scoring. So you have to follow up these patients, all suspected RM, will not be dismissed within 1 year. Okay? So treatment will be very important in those who have acute RM. So what is the treatment? If the ASO is positive, then we give the antibiotic for 10 days or 1 injection. Okay? And follow up will be very important before discharging the patient. So if you diagnose a patient with RF, there should be no excuse for you not to tell this patient na dapat babalik siya for every 21 days injection until 18 to 21 years old. So this is the recommendation for the major manifestation and minor manifestation. Okay. So the Jones criteria has been updated. Before it was dependent only for on the manifestation of murmur and arthritis, carditis. But now, the echo is very important to check for subclinical arthritis or subclinical involvement. Wherein any murmur, kasi pag mild na ang murmur, you do not hear the murmur. So they can have an initial attack. So pag subclinical, then it can be treated already as major criteria as carditis. So in the revised Jones criteria, you have an initial acute RF2 major and 1 minor, plus you have an recurrent acute rheumatic fever. They will usually present the same way as it presented before. So they can have 2 major or 1 major and 2 minor, or now 3 minor manifestations are already considered to be RF, especially in highly endemic areas like the Philippines. So in a recurrent ARF, then three major manifestations may be considered as RM. So there are now two differences if it is a low risk population or moderate and high risk. The Philippines is under moderate and high risk. In a low risk population, you have a prevalence of less than 3 or less than 2, 0 to 2 per 100,000. In the Philippines, we have incidence of 3 to 5, therefore we are moderate. So what is the difference? In both of the major criteria, the difference is in the arthritis. In the low risk, polyarthritis only, but in the highly endemic areas like the Philippines, we now consider monoarthritis as a major manifestation, no, versus polyarthritis. And I think that will be the most important. In both, you have to check subclinical, which means even in the absence of a murmur, then this patient can already have carditis. Therefore, to the echo will be very important. Among the minor criteria, what will be the difference? Monoarthralgia is already considered as a minor criteria in rheumatic fever versus before polyarthralgia. Fever, I think that's the most important, no? And of course, look for signs of inflammation, ESR more than 30, and CRP more than 3. So prolonged interval after accounting for age, variability unless carditis is a major criteria. So in the minor criteria, monoarthralgia is now considered as positive. Okay. So you have to uh, diagnose or you have to stratify the different types of patients depending upon the 2D echo. You have staging of the disease where in stage A, it means they are only at risk. There is risk for development of valvular heart disease, and this is indicative of a minor or a mild or zero cardiac involvement. Progressive disease, patients with mild to moderate severity of RF or valvular involvement and are asymptomatic with normal left ventricle. So on physical exam, it can still be very hard. So we are concerned in stage C and D. In stage C, these are those you find in IM or in adults more than 15 years old and above, wherein there is valve mitral regurgitation, aortic insufficiency, or all valves, or at least 2 to 3 valves may be involved. You have to remember that in rheumatic fever, the whole endocardium is involved. There's inflammation. So progression in the RF inflammation will involve one or more valves, usually 2 valves, a combination of mitral aortic, mitral tricuspid, so all of them may be involved. And if the heart is enlarged or more than 5.5, they are stage C. But if they have signs of heart failure, then they are stage D. Why is this important? Because you have to send the patients for surgery at stage C so that they have better chances of living. And stage A and B, that those are the stages which occur in pediatrics, are the ones who will need prophylaxis or benzathine penicillin every 21 days. You have to know that once the heart is involved, valvular heart disease, then the injection is for life, especially if they have undergone intervention. However, if they are only here, then the injection is only up to 18 to 21 years old. So what are the goals in treatment? Treat a previously untreated strep infection. So if the ASO titer is more than 100, this is the reason why we give 10 days antibiotic or a single dose of IM penicillin to treat a previously untreated infection. So if the ASO titer is high, ibig sabihin, he had a strep infection 2 to 3 weeks ago. No? If the ASO titer, however, is negative, it does not indicate the patient does not have rheumatic fever because you have to take it the whole symptoms, no? Or you have to know that the ASO is only positive if it is taken 2 weeks after the strep infection. More than 2 weeks, the ASO now will be negative. no? You have to control the inflammatory response. So you have rheumatic fever is progressive. There can be reactivation. So the ESR and CRP are elevated. That is why we give them an anti-inflammatory, either aspirin or prednisone. And the most important is prevent progression by giving secondary prophylaxis or every 21 days injection. So every contact of a health professional will not be full treatment and substandard unless you talk about prophylaxis or every 21 days injection in a patient. So in the treatment of rheumatic fever, there are first is primary prevention is eradicate the strep by giving 10 days penicillin or fully treating an untreated strep. Step 2 is give anti-inflammatory treatment. Step 3 is supportive therapy if there is heart failure. And the most important in the prevention of recurrent attacks or progression of RM is injection. IM injection every 21 days until 21 years of age or 14 years. So why is IM injection very important? Because the dose will only decrease. They have found out that there's a decrease in the dose only after 3 weeks compared with oral penicillin, wherein after initial throw, you have to drink the medicine after 8 to 12 hours to ensure consistency or a full dose. No? So there are chances that the patient might miss the doses, therefore there is poorer control. So the recommendation, especially with carditis, is to give IM injection. So in children, we use the weight. If the weight is less than 27 kilograms, we give half the vial. More than 27 kilograms, then we give the full vial. Phenoxypenicillin may be an alternative if they are mild, but you have to monitor for progression. If after echo, after 6 months to 1 year, there is progression, you have to shift to IM for a better control. For those who are allergic to penicillin, you can give erythromycin also at 50% the dose or 20 milligram. For that is the full treatment for sore throat, you have to give them for 10 days. If you have arthritis only, you can give an anti-inflammatory aspirin. In carditis and heart failure, we give prednisone as an anti-inflammatory. In secondary prophylaxis, now this is now the injection. So you can give benzathine penicillin, oral penicillin, or macrolides. No? But these are more expensive. So what is recommended is the IM penicillin or ano. What are the factors? So sasabihin sa'yo, how long po ang injection? So it depends upon the severity of the carditis. Nowadays, they found out that in school children, if they are mild or only valvulitis, they may have a low risk for progression, therefore the injection might be only for 2 years. But once you have stage B, you have to complete injection for 10 years. Or if less common injection up to 25 years old. Since it's uncommon recurrence after 25 years old, and that's the reason why for older adults, we stop the prophylaxis unless there is chronic valvulopathy. So that's the reason why we shift to oral in adults because there is a low incidence of recurrence of strep infection after 25 years of age. So what is the duration? It depends on the category. When there is carditis and persistent heart disease, it should be 10 years or until 40 years of age, whichever is long. It becomes lifelong in those who have undergone surgery or intervention. RF with carditis but no valvular heart disease 10 years or until 21 years old. In rheumatic fever without carditis, it is 5 years or until 21 years of age, whichever is longer. So kung 5 years na siya but less than 21, you have to do a repeat echo and confirm that there is really no carditis. Otherwise, you still have the risk for. So how long will you give? So if the patient is sensitive to penicillin, we give oral erythromycin. The patient has carditis, IM penicillin every 21 days. If the patient is high risk, then if yes, check the duration. Also, yung sinabi ko sa inyo, until 21 to 41. And it has to be 10 years. If it's 10 years, you have to repeat the echo kung talagang walang involvement. Otherwise, if the patient is 21 years old, you have to evaluate regularly to look for valvulitis and may continue until 25 years of age. Okay. Another is if the patient has multiple valve involvement. So ibig sabihin more than 2 valves, it makes it severe. We check if the patient is in heart failure. If the patient is heart failure, we give oral prophylaxis. If the patient had intervention, valve repair or valve replacement, then the patient is on Coumadin, again, you give oral. So how long? For life, no? For life, if the patient underwent intervention or until 21 days. So sometimes we ask the patient para they could comply. You ask the child, how long will you need the injection? So you can ask, you can choose between lifetime or until debut. So of course, they like to stop, and there is better compliance with IM injection. So a child with rheumatic fever with arthritis. So in this case, uh, let's have a case. A child with rheumatic fever with arthritis completed 5 years of IM penicillin at 12 years of age and is recurrence free. Can we stop already the secondary prophylaxis? What is the answer? The answer is we cannot. So arthritis in children recurs with carditis. Therefore, you have to rule out that there is no carditis involvement. Only carditis can have long sequela in a child. So you have to confirm that there is no carditis before you stop. Okay, so they have found out that it can progress. No, in a child, they followed up 1,000 children after 20 years. No, and they found out that they can progress. 51% can have MR. No, there is progression. 100% with either acute or subacute will have the progression to MR. So you cannot dismiss. Always follow up the patient. Now, if you like to stop no, in less than 21 years of age, you have to do the echo and check for cardiac involvement. Continue for class B or higher or those with moderate. Follow up symptoms every 3 months and repeat echo after 6 months to 1 year. And caution for recurrence. No? And if there's a recurrence, you have to give the antibiotic for 10 days. Okay. Next, a patient in oral penicillin and secondary prophylaxis. Is it the same as IM penicillin? So sabi nila, is it the same? Sabi ko kanina, no. So it's a fact na. So oral penicillin pala is the same as IM as long as it is taken MMA. So sometimes if they are not like IM, we allow the patient to be on oral, but you have to repeat the echo after 6 months to 1 year to check for improvement. There is no improvement or persistent mitral or regurgitation, then you have to shift. Why is this important? Because the plasma half-life of oral is 45 to 60 minutes. If there's a peak dose of 46 hours and it gets excreted in the urine. So 40% of the dose is excreted in the urine as unchanged or penicilloic acid. So the duration is 10 hours after oral administration. So you have to take the second dose after 10 hours. So there is no 24 hours control. Versus in IM, it is used in IM. Why? There are different preparations for penicillin. You have to check that the PNG, if injected muscularly, ganyan lang hanggang 2 hours lang, di ba? Procaine penicillin hanggang 4 hours. That's why you have to specify that it is the benzathine penicillin because they found out that the dose decreases after 12 to 18 hours and then persists. So the longest duration of action is of penicillin G or IM penicillin is 3 weeks to 30 days. So it is the best medium for control of RFRHD and not penicillin G, wherein the half-life is 336 hours. Okay. Next question. In secondary prophylaxis and control of RF, 500 milligrams once a day is the same as 250 milligrams once a day. Sometimes because it's unavailable, they give 500 milligrams per hour. So we have to prove na it's what is the answer. It's not, no? RF patients have a 15% chance of having recurrent tonsillitis versus 3% in the general population. It is the recurrent bouts of tonsillitis which will lead to chronic valvulopathy. And in the 500 milligrams, you only increase the first stroke. Taas lang siya than the 250. However, pareho pa rin, since it's oral, it will have the same duration of action. Kahit mas mataas ang dose, it will not change the duration. Therefore, the 500 milligrams should be shifted to 250 milligrams 2 times a day. So in secondary prophylaxis, the objective for chronic or recurrent infection is sustained with low dose antibiotics. So you have to give 50% the therapeutic dose. That's why it's 250. A higher dose only increases the peak serum concentration level with a linear dose relationship, but with the same degradation by half, the half-life after 90 to 110 minutes until 16 hours. Therefore, you cannot give this as a prevention. RF prophylaxis, which should be given only 2 times a day, will be comparable to IM penicillin. So in the oral penicillin, they found out that they have 2 recurrences in 126 patients who were followed up for 1 year. Risk of recurrence for a decade or more. However, scientific evidence shows that benzathine penicillin is the most effective for prevention. And this is the author. They have the most cases in Australia. There are the most cases in the Aborigines. That's why the studies usually come from Australia. So the optimal secondary penicillin is IM penicillin versus oral. This is the optimum regimen for penicillin, wherein the benzathine penicillin versus oral. In benzathine penicillin, there is consistent dose versus the oral penicillin, it can decrease. So here's after initial dose, it can decrease. Therefore, IM penicillin. They also compared the serum levels of benzathine penicillin in the child. So the serum penicillin levels in 193 was the same, It decreases only in 36%, it decreased, O 44%, wala ng 28 days. And that is the reason why we shifted to 21 days for better control than before we were giving it at 28 days. And they found out that to prevent rheumatic fever, you have to give 100%. 80% will be good enough, but less than 50% or less than 80% can lead to recurrence and progression of heart. So the recommendation is IM penicillin is optimum penicillin as secondary prophylaxis in RF-RHD because there is evidence that it can decrease the recurrence of strep infection and stop chronic valvulopathy. If oral penicillin is used, it should be option only for the mild types. Re-evaluation is needed yearly so you can shift to IM with progression or recurrence despite good compliance. You have to look for recurrence and subclinical carditis. The evaluation yearly to the echocardiogram reserved for those who cannot undergo IM penicillin, like if there is a contraindication like increased muscle mass, heart failure, or patient is on warfarin. And when the patient is not able to come for IM injection, the patient can take oral, but it cannot replace IM penicillin. So regular IM penicillin can improve echocardiogram findings of chronic valvulopathy if it is given by 180 to 100% in 6 to 8 months. And there is evidence that post-penicillin era, there is 70% resolution of heart murmurs after 8 years of mild MR, which fell from 89 to 18% if you do IM penicillin. So there is no exchange for treatment, only through IM. So adherence to time frame is very important. Acute rheumatic fever can recur within 12 months after the onset. Progression from acute fever to rheumatic heart disease from onset to the first episode of RF is the progression. Progression from mild to severe, for most recent review of mild to severe, no, that is the progression. Improvement is the first improved echo after the last, and death will be 12 months. Death in RF can be occur within 12 months before the death. So, how many doses of secondary prevention can give an improvement? So, good secondary prophylaxis, you can improve if there is compliance within 22 to 52 months. 22 is 2 to 3 years. 2 to 5 years. That is why in patients who have mild, dapat, especially in children, dapat 2 years ibibigay because progression can still occur within 22 to 50 months. And what is the proportion of acute that could have been prevented if all people reach a specified adherence, no? At least 80% compliance is good enough because they found that the 70 to 90% can prevent progression if you give the prophylaxis. Therefore, the heart of the matter for pediatrics is giving the IM prophylaxis or IM penicillin to decrease the number of young adults developing rheumatic heart disease. Okay? So proportion of mortality which will be prevented if you give the injection, 70% of mortality will be prevented. So there is no exchange for 90% compliance for IM penicillin or injection. Okay, so there are 4 areas of control, no, of RFRHD. Ito, prevention of overcrowding and exposure. Of course, we cannot, or improvement in healthcare is for the government. So we decrease the group A streptococcus. Primary prevention, treat sore throat, no, to prevent the gas infection leading to rheumatic heart disease. Secondary infection is secondary prophylaxis with IM penicillin and prevent heart failure by preventing death. Medical check who are good candidates for surgery because once there is definite progression of RF, hence there is MR or AR. Okay. So any questions? So what is important for us? Dapat alam nyo what is a true sore throat, correct diagnosis of RF, give prophylaxis and those who have carditis, and then surveillance is very important. The echo is very important. Okay, so in 2018, we were approved for free benzodiazepine. In the US, they found out that when they gave it for free, they were able to eradicate RFRHD in 20 years. So we have the chance of decreasing RF in the country once we implement the full implementation of free injection or IM penicillin injection until 21 years old among children. So any questions while I'm preparing the second lecture? So for Kawasaki, I cannot find my asynchronous. Let us, I think you have this on the symptoms. I like to focus on the manifestations of Kawasaki rather than going through this lecture. What is the difference of Kawasaki and rheumatic fever? It's the age involvement. No? In rheumatic fever, since the age of strep is 3 and above, therefore rheumatic fever is common among 5 years old and above in 80%. No? Versus Kawasaki, no? In Kawasaki, it usually involves children less than 3, no? Less than 5 in 80%. And the most dreaded effect of Kawasaki is coronary artery aneurysm and thrombosis. So this is the same coronary artery which is involved in myocardial infarction in adults. No? Therefore, they found out that MI in the young can be due to Kawasaki, which is undetected previously or untreated. Of course, you also have viral myocarditis. In viral myocarditis, there are about 1,000 strains of virus, but some strains may affect the heart. There is inflammation of the myocardium, and the manifestations will be by tachycardia, arrhythmia, or bradycardia. Now, the important thing here is that the viral myocarditis may lead to chronic inflammation of the muscle and therefore dilatation of the muscle leading to cardiomyopathy. So now the studies are ongoing on which how many percent of myocarditis in children have cardiomyopathy, and it's the cardiomyopathy types who are candidates for heart transplantation, no? If the cardiomyopathy is associated with poor LV function. So these are the three acquired heart disease in children. So the extent of cardiovascular involvement, coronary vascular involvement is significant. That in other countries, especially in the developed countries, na Kawasaki disease, we have replaced rheumatic fever as the leading cause of acquired heart disease. However, in the South or in the Asia, rheumatic fever is still the most common acquired heart disease. Detection, however, of Kawasaki disease is important because if you do not detect, so 10 days, no, you have to detect the disease within 10 days. Fever din kasi siya ng fever. Fever more than 5 days. Usually the most important criteria. So if they are not treated, parang progressive ang inflammation. No? If you do not stop the inflammation, 25% will have coronary artery aneurysm. However, if you give treatment, it will decrease to 10%. So the greater risk for cardiac involvement are those in less than 1 year, which are usually atypical. So now, the recommendation is check sino ang high risk. Who are the high risk? Therefore, the high risk are the ones you will follow up even if you give the treatment to check if they will develop coronary aneurysm at a later age. And it's usually the very young and the very old or those who are more than 7. So they can have mortality, no, if 15 to 45 days after onset of fever, or as a consequence of coronary damage may become evident until later years if there is occlusion or of the progressive aneurysm and thrombosis. Okay, so the cardiac involvement up to 50% show a decrease in ventricular function. So those who die, no, in the first 10 days is because they have associated heart failure. So is there incidence of recurrence? Kawasaki disease can recur, and it can also involve families by 2.1%. There is more involvement of males, and they found out that it is more common in Japan. No? Maybe there's also genetic. So that most Japanese who go to foreign countries or Asians who go to other countries are usually the ones who develop Kawasaki. So they have found out that maybe it is genetic. And over the years, they did not find the etiology. Before, number one, of course, it is not infectious because they found out the blood culture is negative. Who are affected, most are Japanese, di ba? So, what is rheumatic fever, there is a genetic predisposition. Baka nagre-react yung blood mo to certain immune components in the blood. Therefore, some are more prone to KD than the others. So this remains to be substantiated. Recent investigations that the immune response is oligoclonal, which is conventional, versus monoclonal with a super antigen-driven response. So they found out in it is super antigen-driven. So all actually are in no? But regardless of the etiology, there's increased production of inflammatory cytokines. There is maximum elevated levels of metalloproteinases to mediate vascular damage. During COVID time, in 2021 to 2022, they found out there was increased incidence of Kawasaki-like symptoms. So the Kawasaki, they found out that COVID, the immune response after COVID can stimulate Kawasaki. What is the difference? In COVID, it does not lead to progression. Usually, it reverts to normal or these patients can die if the heart is affected. However, there is less chance for it to be a progressive disease. Versus Kawasaki, wherein once diagnosed and once there's an inflammation, even despite IVIG, there can still be a chance of persistent progression leading to aneurysmal formation lifetime if they are in the high risk. So, kailangan malaman mo who are high risk so that they are usually followed up for life. So, there are two phases, di ba? Yung early phase and the 10 days is very important. In the early phase, you have just swelling, edema, but the internal lamina is still intact, inflamed lang siya. So, the most important is after that, you have 7 to 9 days of fever. So, this is the first 5 days that they found out that the maximum inflammation will occur after 6 days. No? There's influx of neutrophils, proliferation of CD8, cytotoxic lymphocytes, and you could produce plasma cells. So, and then there can still be progression 2 weeks or months. So, they found out na dapat ibigay mo ang treatment in less than 10 days. No? Because here you have fragmentation, progressive dilatation, and aneurysmal formation will occur after 10 days. So, fragmental vascular damage, and in the progression, there can be endothelial cells, active inflammation, leading to progressive fibrosis and vascular stenosis. So, like rheumatic fever, only rheumatic fever can lead to progression of the valve. Only Kawasaki disease will lead to progression in the vascular or the aneurysmal formation. So how do you stop the inflammation? And that is why we give the IVIG before 10 days to prevent the progression of progressive fibrosis and vascular stenosis. So there are two things therefore in Kawasaki. It's not just aneurysmal formation, but there can be calcification. There is calcification and fibrosis of the coronary artery, nagiging bone inconsistency. And that's the reason that it's important to stop rheumatic Kawasaki and giving treatment. So detection therefore is very important, or suspicion, no? So in Kawasaki, the most important manifestation is fever and rash, no? So if a child has fever and rash, the timing of events is very important in the differential diagnosis. So the most important criteria is fever longer 5 days, plus 4 of the 5 main clinical features with similar excellent. If a patient presents with 4 or more of the principal criteria, then you can have Kawasaki disease. So you have typical and atypical Kawasaki disease. Okay? Typical Kawasaki disease, you have fever plus the manifestations. In atypical, the fever might not be lasting more than 5 days, but you have signs of changes in the heart or beginning changes of aneurysmal formation. So in typical Kawasaki disease, fever of 3 to 5 days plus 3. So the changes in the extremities, polymorphous exanthems, the change in the lips and oropharyngeal mucosa. So the most characteristic feature of Kawasaki is the changes in the lips and oropharyngeal mucosa. You will have to look also at the eyes, and look, if you are to look for one sign, look at cervical lymphadenopathy. So it will not happen unless you look for it. So if you are looking for Kawasaki, always palpate for unilateral or one-sided, non-painful cervical lymphadenopathy to complete probably your fever plus 3 of the criteria. So in Kawasaki, no, the timing of events is very important. The whole duration of the disease actually is 72 days. So you can divide into acute, subacute, and convalescent. So it can be weeks. So as a doctor, you might see the patient in the acute phase, sa ginaakuita ng doktor na papunta sa subacute or convalescent phase. So after the 3 weeks, after 6 weeks. So the disease can occur, have different presentation. So in the first phase, you have a high-grade fever. There is no arthritis. There can be myocarditis. There can be changes in the lips and the mucosa. So in the acute phase, the most important are fever, changes in the lips and mucosa. You have palmar changes after at a later time. So nauuna ang mucosa changes in the first week. The changes in the palms and desquamation occurs after 1 week. Okay, and you can have cervical adenitis. So those are the most important. What is the hallmark of the subacute phase? Subacute phase after the 2 weeks, the most important feature is thrombocytosis. So, if you are the second doctor who sees the patient after 1 week, the most important for you to check is get the CBC para makita mo if there's a rising platelet. So, the rising thrombocytosis may indicate Kawasaki disease, plus changes in the palms, so peeling of the palms and so on. And look for the echo to check for aneurysm. So aneurysms will occur after 10 days. Desquamation can occur after 10 days. And thrombocytosis can occur after. So even if you miss the diagnosis, if you have these features and the ESR is still very high, then you can still give the IAIG even if you don't know if it is still working. Okay, so you already have this in the asynchronous lecture. So fever more than 5 days. Now these are the characteristics of the fever. Then these are the features of the rash. In the very young, no, they can be mistaken as a diabetic rash. So this is polymorphic exanthem. That's why in children, no, the most important differential diagnosis is measles. So measles, how do you differentiate fever and rash of measles from fever and rash of Kawasaki? So, anong pinaka-important feature of measles is the fever, the rashes will occur cephalopodal, starting from the neckline, from the hairline, from the face, neckline, hair, face, body, until the sole of the feet. The fever will not disappear until the rashes reach the sole. Versus in Kawasaki, the rashes will occur usually in the truncal, tsaka iba-iba form. Okay? But never vesicular or bullous. If it's vesicular or bullous, the most important differential diagnosis is what? Blood infection or chickenpox. So never. Okay. So there can be fine desquamation occurs after 7 days. So this is the akala ng doctor, it's a diaper rash. But once you have desquamation, you are sure that this is Kawasaki. And this is the most common area for those younger children, especially infants who have Kawasaki. When they have fine pustules there, then it can be forgotten. So differential diagnosis is there. Then you have changes in the lips and oropharyngeal mucosa. You have very red lips and the child is very irritable. And you have the strawberry tongue. This is the strawberry tongue, which occurs in 75 to 90% of patients. Differential diagnosis here is the strawberry tongue is here. What is the difference? This is also due to strep. No? The pharyngeal infection, no, due to strep. A difference is in if you oropharyngeal infection due to strep, if you give the antibiotic, the fever will rise within 24 to 48 hours. Versus Kawasaki, the fever will not rise. despite antibiotics. So we have this, look for the other signs, like the other manifestations, which can be Kawasaki, and get the CBC. So it's usually bacterial in oropharyngeal infection. Another feature is the edema of the hands and feet. And usually there is pain during the edema. That's why they have pain on locomotion. This stitching occurs in 94% initially as erythema. Why do they peel? Because initially in the acute phase, they became edematous. So once the edema regresses, then you have peeling of the sides. There's the desquamation. There is painful erythema kasi edematous siya. After the erythema, after 14 days, then they can have desquamation in the chloride in that. So in the second week, you have to look for peeling. Another important feature is the conjunctivitis. So ito ang pinaka-important feature. There is sparing. Sparing around the limbus. So this is the limbus. You have bilateral. It is non-exudative versus measles is exudative. Number two, this is the sparing, which is characteristic of Kawasaki. So in the diagnosis of Kawasaki, look into the eyes. So it has to be the injections should be from center to out, parang sun. Versus in other, like measles, the injection of the red, the conjunctivitis is from periphery to center. Versus Kawasaki, center to periphery. So occurs in 88% of patients wherein they can have only mild erythrocyclosis versus in measles wherein you have eye pain and photophobia. Ito, there are no discharge. So again, you have to look for the unilateral suppurative cervical lymphadenopathy. So they are usually more than 1.5 cm and it's only on one side. If there is an associated bacterial infection like submandibular lymph nodes, if you have oropharyngeal infection, they are usually bilateral. So most important characteristic aside from that is they are very irritable and they are always crying. So irritability, fever, look at the eyes, oropharyngeal changes. Then you have to suspect Kawasaki disease. And what do you do? Get the CBC, look for signs of infection. But we have to know also that in Kawasaki, lahat siya is plain. So other manifestations to other areas to look for inflammation would be the urine. The urine, there can be positive many WBCs. However, if you get the culture, it's negative. You have abnormal plasma, hypoalbuminemia. That's why sometimes they're edematous. Hyponatremia, and others will be they can have sinus changes also, however, to the lumbar top negative. Okay, so the clinical manifestations, the most important in 100% is fever, cervical lymph nodes, and then the rash, and cardiovascular complications in the acute phases only 30%. Okay, so there are two types: the typical Kawasaki, which we already described, plus the atypical. No? In typical, you have more of the 5+ fever. However, in atypical, kulang ang signs. 2 to 3 of the principal features only, with or without fever. So the most important characteristic in the atypical is the presence of coronary abnormalities by echocardiography. Versus in typical, last siya, di ba, does not need the presence because you already filled the clinical criteria. So echo will be very important to make diagnosis. So this is what we usually do to assess the patients with Kawasaki. Look for the characteristics of the 5 major fever plus 3 to 5 of the criteria. If it is consistent with KD or inconsistent. So typical is consistent, then you can treat. If it is inconsistent, then KD might be unlikely. But if the fever persists, then you have to evaluate the patient every day. Because there is what you call incomplete Kawasaki. When you say incomplete Kawasaki, hindi pa niya tapos lahat. You might be seeing the patient 1, 2, 3 days wherein all the other manifestations are not yet there. So you have to follow up your patient every day to look for other manifestations. So then you get the laboratory findings. So you usually look for inflammatory markers, the CRP and the ESR. If there is no sign of inflammation, we follow up the patient daily. If the fever continues for 2 days, then you have to assess, go back to the loop and assess the patient. Then follow up for the resolution of fever. If the fever resolves, you still have to follow up the patient if there is peeling or not. If there is typical peeling in the second week, then you have to do the echo to check for signs of coronary. If there is a sign for inflammation plus fever, then you get the supplemental criteria. If they have 3 supplemental criteria, then it is typical. However, if it less, diba, it is atypical. Therefore, get the echo to check for aneurysmal change or increase in the Z-score of the size of the coronary arteries more than 2. So, and then you have to treat. If it is not, then you have to repeat the echo within 2 weeks to 1 month to check for signs of changes in the artery and also to check for the thrombocytosis. So other findings in acute Kawasaki, as I said earlier, other areas can have inflammation, but the 5 criteria would be very. So the cardiac manifestations usually occur in the subacute phase. So it's usually after the 10 days. So to the echo is very required. The valvular regurgitation may occur in the acute stage, but usually reserve can be due to myocardial ischemia. No? If it is occurs late, it may not be related to ischemia. No? So it is usually transient. Okay. So in myocarditis, common feature of early Kawasaki is myocarditis. So they can have arrhythmia, tachycardia, very slow heart rate, or very fast heart rate. And the severity does not appear to be related with the presence or absence of coronary artery. So in cardiac complications or coronary artery aneurysm, they are usually detected after 10, so after the second week or out within the next 6 to 8 weeks, so up to 60 days, no? So the total duration is actually 70 days. And the prevalence in untreated children is 18 to 23%, and treatment will decrease to 10%. So what are the risk factors? So you have to know the risk. Who are at risk? Males, no? Males, number 2, if the infant is very young or the child is very old. Persistent fever more than 5 days. If you get the CBC, children with higher baseline neutrophil and BAL, and then patients with very low platelet count, and those with resistant IVIG, resistant Kawasaki. So the response to treatment is very important. If you give the IVIG, the fever will usually lies, nawawala yung fever within 24 to 48 hours. Some patients, however, now will have a resistant Kawasaki disease. So the fever will continue after 2 days, no? So these are very important and it places the child at high risk. So those the resistant types ang pa-follow up hanggang adult to check for coronary artery disease. Okay. So how often should you do echo? So at the time of diagnosis, after 2 weeks, sinasabi natin, after 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days. And then after 6 to 8 weeks. How long does the inflammation occur? We usually give the IVIG upon diagnosis plus aspirin, no? To decrease also the inflammation. So the aspirin is usually given up to 2 weeks or 14 days. And you check for the after 2 weeks of aspirin, then after a month, then after 17 days, or after 8 weeks. So if by 8 weeks the patient exhibits no coronary involvement, follow-up echo is recommended at 1 year. And those who have significant aneurysm should be followed up. So how do you define a coronary artery aneurysm? aneurysm. So before, you have a change in the size of the aneurysm, but now we use the Z-score to check for the size. If the Z-score is more than 2, we need to send aneurysm. So this is the normal, no? This is the normal coronary artery, and this is a very dilated circumflex coronary artery. So these are important for us to measure. It does not, of course, occur within 2 weeks. So untreated, so if the child is given IVIG, then you have to follow up the patient until to check for development. So what do we do in the echo? You check for increase in the aneurysm, so the aortic root, ejection fraction, check for a pericardial effusion and MRAI in the acute phase. So how do we treat Kawasaki? The Kawasaki therefore is stop the inflammatory reaction after that. Before the 10 days, so decrease the inflammation within the coronary artery. And after acute phase is prevent the from thrombosis or inhibition of platelet aggregation when there is thrombocytosis. Okay. So acute stage, we give IVIG, single infusion, 2 grams per kilo for 10 to 12 hours. Then we give aspirin, 80 to 100 milligram per kilo, 3 to 4 times a day, usually for 2 weeks. In subacute and convalescent phase, if the aneurysm persists, then you give, or there's thrombocytosis, you still continue the aspirin, 3 to 5 milligram per kilo to prevent thrombosis. So as I was saying earlier, in the treatment, you give IVIG to prevent the progression of the different vascular stenosis and fibrosis that can occur. So it has a generalized anti-inflammatory effect because of the modulation of cytokine, neutralization of bacterial superantigens. It increases the suppressor cells, suppression of antibody synthesis, and the provision of anti-angiotypic antibodies decrease the inflammation. So the therapy with high dose and aspirin is within 10 days of onset of fever to decrease progression to coronary aneurysm and dilatation. Efficacy when initiated later 10 days or after have been detected, it has not been evaluated. But now the belief is if it was more than 10 days, but the ESR and the platelet are still high, then we still give the IVIG. So the patients should be given therapy after 10 days who have manifestations of continued inflammation like fever plus the lab results. And despite treatment, 2 to 4 of patients will still develop coronary aneurysm. So acute, how high is the aspirin? We give it at 80 to 100 milligram per kilo, and then after that, as an antiplatelet or antithrombotic, 3 to 5 milligram per kilo for 14 days or no. So persistent, you have what you call resistant Kawasaki disease. So the most important feature Kawasaki after treatment is the persistence of the fever. So if the fever that does not lies after, then you have what you call resistant Kawasaki. And the only treatment is give again IVIG. So IVIG is relatively very expensive. One vial is about 15 to 20,000. So if you are a child is 20 kilograms times 2, you have 40 grams. 40 grams, you have need 8 vials. Kasi 5 grams per vial. So 20 times 8 is about 200,000. So it's very effective. And here, they are resistant. You still give a second dose of IVIG. So resistance occur in 5 to 10% of those who have persistent fever after 48 hours of treatment. And the treatment is give again. So usually it is those who are more than 8 years old who have resistant IVIG. That's why we can give up for 2 times and then they do not respond. Then we give them corticosteroids. So steroids nowadays, before it should be restricted, but now they are now looking into giving steroids, either a single therapy or as an adjunct to those which are severe. So the dose is 30 milligram per kilo given as infusion for 2 to 3 hours, then given once a day until the fever lyses. So, sample, bigay ka ng 1 day, may lagnat pa, then relatively, this is less expensive than giving ABIG. So other treatment of options are not available in the country, but when it was due to COVID, they were able to give Afliximab. So any questions? The echo should be obtained early and after 2 months to detect arrhythmia, heart failure, development of giant aneurysm when there are more than 8, and may require anticoagulant therapy. How about the immunization? Since you gave already IVIG, the live a viral exam like varicella and measles immunization should be deferred for 11 months after IVIG. The risk of exposure to measles is high and should be immunized and re-immunized at least 11 months after IVIG. Schedule of subsequent immunization should not be interrupted, and yearly influenza is indicated for those children 6 months of age who require long-term therapy of aspirin. So is there a chance for regression? Yes, no, 6 to 7%. They found out that there was already regression. Associated factors, older age or more than one, or those reported present in the distal CA. So follow-up is very important. So long-term follow-up after Kawasaki, they found out that you have to check for progression or regression within the next year or 1 year after. For those, however, who do not have regression, they found out that they are still at risk for developing hyperlipidemia. So diet is important. So cardiac effect among those who have Kawasaki may not end even if they do not have an aneurysm because they are at risk for developing adult hyperlipidemia. So the risk level is very important. For risk level 1, there is no residual, give aspirin. In risk level 2, transient lang, tapos nawala siya after. So the initial 6 to 8 weeks was given. And then after 1 year, wala siya. However, you have those with small to moderate coronary artery. The aspirin is given until it resolves. For those less than 10 years, there is no restriction beyond the initial week. So depending upon the presence of aneurysm, you can still defect. An echo is done yearly in ECG, and if there is progression, then go. And is the presence of giant aneurysm, then you have to do long-term aspirin and annual follow-up, and later we do a job. So now there is a move na after check, sino ba ang merong residual outcome. So sometimes we recommend a CT angiogram 1 year and 5 years after Kawasaki disease. And if it's positive, until 10 years to detect the presence of aneurysm. Sometimes there is progressive inflammation. That's why there's progressive inflammation. So it's very important for us to cut the inflammation. So how do you use? So aspirin kasi, use aspirin, you give for 2 weeks. So now there have been findings that anti-cholesterol drugs, atorvastatin, or can be used as an anti-inflammatory, and they have found remarkable results with giving aspirin, anti-lipids like atorvastatin, and it's given for 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, any questions? So now the recommendation in Kawasaki is to follow up these patients after 5 to 10 years to check for the presence of aneurysm. And number 2, give more options for treatment, especially in those who are not able to afford IVIG because it's very expensive. So now they're looking into single therapy corticosteroids as an option for patients who have Kawasaki. So any question? Hello? Hello?
Yes po, Doc.
So any question? Okay na? So we have 20 points from the acquired and 20 points from congenital. So if you have question, then you just text me or through your president or through our media office. Okay? Yun na lang.
Thank you po, Doc.